Hello, my darlings, and welcome to Ink Medicine Podcast. I'm here with Morgan. It is May 1st of 2023. This is a human I've known in the online space for over a decade. Not known, like known, but known of and followed and loved the work of. Would you please introduce yourself with your name, your location, your pronouns, any other markers of your identity that you'd like to throw out there?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Morgan, she, her. I've worked in contemporary tattooing, but not as a tattooer since like 2010, just working in and around studios as PR, management, and art archiving, kind of just being an art nerd and cultural, critique analyst person. But as well, I work in Berlin. I have a few different jobs, some in the fields of like relationships, and I work with contemporary artists in other fields. So happy to talk about any and all of the above.
Would you say that you are currently more focused in your chill polyamory projects, or would you say you're still doing both equally?
Sure, yeah. So my relationship work is called Chillpolyam, like you mentioned. That is primarily my main focus since 2020 moving onward, largely because discussions about polyamory is more of like my area of expertise personally. You know, since 2010, I've been working with tattooers because I just love the trade so much, and I have tattooed, but I do not tattoo. And so basically all of my friends and all of my family were like tattooers, and I just wanted to make their lives easier. So I kind of created with Tattrx as an art archivist project, but also as a media and marketing company. Tattrx was like, how can I make your life easier as a tattooer? And it's all about elevating other people's work. So in 2020, when studios shut down and my only main source of income was chill polyamory, of people wanting to talk about non-monogamy, that actually is something I do, you know, and it's not me elevating like other people's areas of expertise. And so it kind of became more of a focus because that actually is something that I can speak to rather than pointing people in the direction of like playing matchmaker, which is what I was largely doing with tattooing. So I do enjoy both, but yeah, in the last few years, it has shifted a bit more to focus on relationship discussions.
I've heard you say in various, or read you say in various like interviews, that you like to wear different hats, and like that makes total sense to me. I feel like it's a really beautiful thing for the brain to be able to like do different things and finish different projects and like start different things and like have that be a continuous stimulation of different parts of your interests and your mind, the way it works. I think that's really cool that you're doing two kind of different, somewhat similar things, like because you're working with humans in their processes.
Thanks. Yeah, I think a lot of tattooers can probably relate to it too, of just like you get a little bit bored. So you always want to mix it up and be working on different things. And so I've always had several jobs at the same time. I've always had several relationships at the same time. I'm non-monogamous since 2012. So I enjoy doing a few different things. And so as a result, my social circles include a wide array of different people that I also enjoy bringing together whenever I have gatherings. It's like people who might not normally meet, which is exciting.
Yeah, networking for your friends. It's awesome. I know that you started doing this work specifically in the tattoo realm when you got a bad tattoo and you were really mad about how you were treated, and it changed your whole career. What were you doing before then? Just like
Sure.
Curious.
I used to work in film production. Since I was 12, I was like recreationally editing. I used to do like tape to tape VHS edits in my room as a kid and walk around with my camera and stuff. And so I was kind of like always focused primarily on nonfiction, like documentary storytelling, and got a higher education in that, specifically on documentary production was my focus. And so I moved to New York also in 2010. And that's the same year I got that bad tattoo. But I was working in film production. And so I really removed myself from doing that professionally and rerouted it to doing it more recreationally. Like I'll still co-produce on documentaries. And I think in a large part, the media landscape now is film production. You are making reels and TikToks and stuff like that. So it's like kind of come full circle. But I stopped doing that around 2011 because the industry is just incredibly abusive, like churn and burn. You can't sleep. You're worth nothing, and I just didn't really want to participate in it anymore. And so I went into hospitality, like hotel, food and beverage recruitment, and became like this matchmaker for a restaurant needs a chef. So then from 2011 to like 2016 or so, that was my full-time job. And all the way from when I got the bad tattoo and I was angrily researching, there has to be a better way. This was such a bad, not just a bad execution of this tattoo in 2010, but it was also just a terrible experience. And I paid a lot of money for the experience. And I thought I had done my research and all of that. And I was like, every part of this is terrible. And so I was sort of like angrily researching, there's got to be a better way to like find tattooers and connect people with tattooers. And so, my blog started to become like this archiving of finding people who were doing like interesting, weird things in tattooing and helping people get in touch with them and follow them and stuff. And that was like old school Tumblr back in 2010. So my relationships with tattooers sort of evolved organically from just becoming a nerd about them. And then in conjunction with working in hospitality recruitment and being a professional matchmaker, I started to enjoy like people looking for a certain kind of aesthetic or technique or, helping them find the right kind of person for them so that they would have the good experience, and tattooers would get the right kind of client who's passionate about what they're doing and ask them for cool, weird shit. So like that really became my job accidentally. But yeah, when I follow the trajectory, even though it's a lot of different intersecting points of experience, it kind of also did start to make sense when I found myself doing it.
You've like literally made up job after job for yourself and like done really well at it. It's really admirable.
Oh, thanks.
Um,
Yeah.
I found Tattrx like really early on. Like I started tattooing in 2008 and I was in, the Bay Area and everything was the same. It was all the same. Like everybody wanted traditional, just like American traditional or like some lettering or like it was all flowers, right? Like it was all the same shit. And I was just like hungry for something different. And then I found your blog and I was just like, oh my God, people are doing different shit in different parts of the world. And I was just like obsessed with it. Like I'd look at it every day. I'd be like, when is there gonna be more, like another post. So, I mean, back then I was like, who is this person? Like, who is this person doing this project? Right. And I remember like seeing a picture of you and you had this like kind of short, what do you call this haircut?
Like a
You had like a bob.
Yeah, like a bob. Yeah.
Yeah, like a straight, like very like sleek sort of bob. And I was like, who is this person? Who is this girl? Like, does she tattoo? Like, no, I guess not. But I was just like, you were like a woman of mystery, international person of mystery. It's like, where is she? Why is she doing this? Like, why is all this work coming out of Europe? And then also South America, there was a lot of artists. Anyway, so I was just like fascinated, with this work that you were doing, putting together this blog. And like when I think I like submitted a couple of pictures and you posted them and I was just like, oh, I get to be on Tattrx. Like it was the coolest thing for me.
It was a cool time. Like I think between 2012 and 2014, 2015, it's like the rise of social media really becoming like a part of people's daily lives. I think Facebook came out in 2005 or 2007, Tumblr in 2010. And I remember the creation of Instagram, and I moved from Tumblr to Instagram because Instagram was new. And so it was this time of so much sharing of ideas. And so even though I didn't live in Europe, like I kept being exposed to people who were trying weird new things. And I think there were fewer barriers to, experimenting. There was like a lot of countries that didn't necessarily have such a rigid tattoo culture or didn't have like as much of an institutional like pathway of apprenticeship that you needed like certain gatekeepers to approve that you could try things. And so it was like a little bit more Wild West. And I think Central and South America experienced similar trajectories with, the sharing of ideas and the sharing of tattooing helping reduce the stigma. And then people who worked in other media, like sculptors and furniture makers and graphic designers, were like, let me learn this trade. And then they brought their unique art school to tattooing pipeline rather than coming up through an old school biker shop, you know? And no shade on that either. Like, I've seen a lot of really cool stuff come out of the traditional pipeline too, but it just widened the landscape, and people, did things that, you know, were maybe unsustainable on purpose or ugly on purpose. And then you would ask why. And then there was all of these cool conversations of, well, who is to judge the value of a tattoo? Because if the designer likes it and the person who wears it likes it, then that's fine and that's valid. And so, there was not just the technique sort of revolution happening, but there was also this philosophy of, can there be objective quality in tattooing? And, you know, it just depends on what you're going for, kind of thing. And so, it was just like a really cool thing to watch happen. And I spent a lot of time with tattooers, and they were like, you know, do you want to learn how to do this? And I thought, I don't know, maybe I do. I clearly am becoming a nerd about it. And so a couple of different friends have like shown me how to tattoo them and like coached me through every step. And I was like, I mean, that was cool. That was a cool thing that you and I did, but I'm not falling in love with doing the trade. I think I'm falling in love with like pattern recognition and like putting people in this cool like editorial flow and making a lot of noise about you and getting people excited about you. That makes me happy. And so, that became kind of a preoccupation, like an obsession for me, was making a lot of noise for all these young artists for a number of years. It was a cool time to be in that, you know, burgeoning social media space.
For sure. And, you know, I think that Tattrx is like a big reason for the progress of cool, new, weird, you know, different shit. I definitely have seen a huge rise of it for sure in the last decade. So when you work with people, like when people come to you and ask you to work with them, what if you don't love what they do? Like, what happens then? Do you say no? Do you do it anyway? Like, tell me more.
Sure. So, well, around like 2015, 2016, I realized like I would love to do this full time and not have it be a hobby, but how do I monetize this without exploiting artists? Because I had tried going the route of making a directory that was like just a niche contemporary tattooing directory. And then like maybe I'll make money for referrals or whatever, but it all just felt strange and kind of like made my relationships and my friendships really transactional. And I wanted to actually be friends with everybody. And so I was like, I don't really know how to make this a job. And then it really came to a head around 2016 when other startups, and that's when I think the apps started seeing tattooing as a money-making opportunity. They started being vultures of my curation and my work and just like taking all of my unpaid hours and then just copy pasting it and charging for it. And so I was like, okay, well, I want to stop doing that then. That's not fun anymore. And I went more into the relationships I had at that time, being like, okay, well, I love you and I love the work that you're doing. And so that speaks to your question of like, would I, you know, get closer in a professional way with someone who I didn't like their work? And the answer is no. Like, I don't think I would really try to have a hands-on working relationship with someone if I wouldn't get their stuff tattooed on me. I feel like that would be disingenuous. I probably wouldn't be a good salesperson. But especially if I am not their client, then it'll be harder for me to imagine how their clients think and what their clients want. So I'd rather like reroute them to other people who get what they're trying to do. And so, my work moved from this like curation. I sort of still passively did social media, like reposting of people, but my full-time employment became, how can I get you press? How can I get you in magazines and newspapers and like talking about what your mission statement is? And like, how can I help you find the kind of client you want. Like, okay, you want to evolve to bodysuits and you want to do these big abstract pieces and only do like 5 of them a year. Great. Let's find that person. And how would we go about doing that? And so it became this more longer term strategy of how to direct tattooers' careers. And so I worked with like a lot fewer people, but I worked in like a very hands-on way that felt very rewarding. But yeah, it was with people that I would definitely get tattooed by them.
So
That's the only way it felt doable.
Have you been tattooed by every person that you've worked with?
No, unfortunately. I think a lot of those working relationships have been without meeting in person for many years. We just like, oh, you're in Australia, I'm in New York. Great, let's talk. Okay, how can we make this happen? It's actually how I moved from New York to Berlin. Was I already had clients here that I had been working with for years. That I felt like, okay, you can vouch for me to the German government that you're paying me money every month, and so I would still love to get tattooed by a lot of the people that I have close working relationships with, but everything in its own time, and I'm not really like, counting on that, or maybe there's not a piece on my body that I have in mind yet. Life is long. Who knows? Never say never. But
that's true. Are you still working on the glitch bodysuit? That's like the chain between artists. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was a really fun sort of accident. This guy Kavan, he goes by It's Just Kavan, Cavan. He and I went to high school together. I knew him since I was 14. And then he became a tattooer, and I reposted something on my Tumblr, and he's like, wait, you run this? And so we just started a friendship again, and he was coming through New York. And so he's a bit of a more like neo-traditionalist, and not normally like the kind of technique or aesthetic that I go towards. But because of our working relationship, I was like, you should do something on me. I don't know what. So I gave him a bunch of pictures of my family because I associated him and his work with nostalgia. And I was like, can you just make something messy, like vaporwave glitchy about this? And he was like, this is weird, but sure. And he ran it through some glitch apps and stuff, all of the photos, and then made this neon glitchy piece on my ribs. And from there, I was like, okay, cool. So this is like a beautiful mess on purpose. It's like a beautiful accident by design was all of these glitches. And so since then, all of these different people, whenever I've been close with a tattooer who thought that was cool, they've now built onto it. And sort of an agreement that everybody has is that their work will be expanded upon if they add to that piece. And so now it goes from my neck down to my ankle of people just like adding stuff in a way that still feels like it's part of the same piece, but you can see each individual person in it too. So it's like this cool collaboration over a decade or so that still is definitely a work in progress. I have more I'd be happy to add. Yeah.
Well, I love so much that concept, specifically on YouTube, because you are a connector of this world. But I feel like so many people, have too much ego to participate in things like this, right? Like, I don't want to build upon somebody else's work. I don't want somebody else to touch mine. Like, there's so much of that in this business, and that's like a huge reason why it's half the time like, what am I doing here?
Yeah, I think it's like something that for myself, being somebody who gets tattoos, I always want to know somebody's ethos on that before they tattoo me, because I'm not in the business of telling tattooers how they should feel, if they should have proprietary sense over their work. I just know that being someone who has tattoos, like I've definitely had artists be like, okay, so this area is mine and you can't add to it. And that always felt off to me. I was just like, but it's my body, man. Like, what if I change my mind? What if I'm a different person? What if your work is flawless and it just reminds me of a time in my life that I want to forget? I don't know. So I've always been more in the camp of like, let the customer do what they want, and you're free to say no to the work if you don't want to. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Is that, what's your ethos on that, being someone who tattoos?
Yeah, for me, every work, when people ask me, like, what's your favorite tattoo you ever done? And I'm like, well, first of all, that's thousands and thousands of tattoos. So like, there's no one, right? And second, it's like, it's about the people. I have specific customers and people who became my friends, right? Who I'm like, that was such a precious treasure of a time in my life because like that person came into my life in this way. So it's more that and like the connection, that I experience with the client and like the flow that is so beautiful, when we can be in that space together and like it just flows, right? So for me, it's just like, do I feel a connection with the person? And if I do, I'll do like almost anything, any kind of conceptual idea. And that would be such a cool thing to do. Like if somebody was like, I'm creating this art project in my body that's a compilation of all the work that I love and like add whatever you want to like this section of it, right? Like I'd be like stoked. So yeah, that's really cool. I wish more people were open to that kind of thing. And in my experience, having, like being 39 and like having had a lot of tattoos that I've gotten in my life and like having people that I really would love to be tattooed by, either say no or just like not respond, right? Because they'd be like, well, you don't have a full arm for me to work on. You don't have a lot of skin. Like I do have a lot of skin. It's just not singular, right? It's not a full arm. And that's fine. Like there's so many people in the world. But I'm also like, the other piece I'm amazed by is like, how do you so many amazing tattoo artists and you can get in their books and you can like make those connections. Like I've found it really difficult to connect with tattooers in general. I have a couple of friends in the business, but not a ton,
Yeah, I think that's an experience that most people have. And it's a point of privilege I've like accidentally found myself in, is that because I was a blogger for a lot of contemporary tattooers when they were just learning, there was this relationship sort of built when they were getting started that we have some name recognition. And so I automatically would sort of be recognized as like a friend might, even though we might not have met. And so, but I think in general, at this point, because I'm not doing as much work with tattooers, I have those relationships as a holdover, but because I'm investing my energy in different kinds of work more moving forward, I do also have that experience of just like, okay, they don't know who I am. They don't know my history or my work. And so, there's only like tattooers you only have two hands and I only have so many hours in the day. And I think that's one of the beautiful things is a lot of times people can feel a sense of scarcity or even a competition. Like, oh no, you can't do work similar to me. It's like, but will you ever tattoo that person? Like what, isn't there enough to go around? I get the not wanting people to mimic your exact design or not wanting them to, infringe on something that's very important to you. But it gets tricky because it's not possible to see everybody or reply to everybody. Like you're only one person. And so that's, I think a lot of my present day work with tattooers, in addition to PR work that I've done, is managing books and sort of continuing that matchmaking relationship style. Most of the tattooers that I work with on a day-to-day basis now, I'm like screening their submissions, acknowledging every one of them, saying like, thanks so much for reaching out. We're so happy you're drawn to their work. Here's why it will or won't be a good fit. And I think learning why or why not it's a good match at least gives you something. You feel like heard. You're not just submitting an idea into the void. And then it can be really beneficial for everybody involved if you understand why you're a good match, either your idea or your budget or the amount of flexibility you have and that you don't care, like understanding what would make a tattooer say yes or no. I try to educate clients with that because they don't understand. They're just like, I don't know why I'm not getting a response, because they don't know how to brief a tattooer. And so I try to, serve as like an entry point of like educating people on how to get a response from an artist. Is kind of part of my work that I do as well. I get, but it's tricky, and every artist is different. Not every artist has an assistant.
For sure. And like, for sure. And some people they won't respond even if you do, like there's a specific person I really would love to be tattooed by. He's up in Seattle. And I was like, hi, like anything you want to do. I love everything you do. Like, here's a bunch of skin. I'll come up anytime. I've done that several times. I've seen them say, email me with this keyword in the title, like, that you want the style. I'm like, yes, I could doing that again, but like, I just don't hear back. And that's what it is. And that's, it is what it is.
That's another thing, is there's no way to be a perfect inquiry or a perfect client. Like the number of tattooers I've worked with, it's like there's so like artists are like herding cats, it's just a bunch of temperaments. It's a bunch of unpredictability. A lot of people just like, are having a bad day. So they just delete all their emails, and you were one of them, and like, or they're just like, I'm going through 3 months, I'm going offline. And I'm like, so what do you want to do about all the people requiring? It's like, it doesn't matter if they want it that bad, they'll apply again in 3 months. It's like, I've just heard a variety of like artists' approach to dealing with mass inquiry that has nothing to do with the approach of the client. And I think it goes back to being a matchmaker, just like sometimes it is luck and timing. It's not always in like that there's a perfect way to approach. But yeah, if you want to be seen by somebody who's excited to work with you, so even though their portfolio or their technique is amazing, if they're not excited about working with you, then it probably wouldn't be the best experience, at least in my experience, So I usually just roll with that, and I, try and take it in stride.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And it depends on the day, right? Like I know some of the biggest names in the business that are like, you come to them one day and they're lovely, and the next day they're totally shithead. Like there's no, people are just being people. People be peopling.
Artists be artisting too. There's like a lot more moodiness, and that's what I love about artists, is like the messiness of it. But it's also why I proposed bringing like my administrative talents to artists, because that is a place that I see consistently lacking, that they could use a type A with their, creative process.
I wish that this person would hire you, this person I'm trying to get tattooed by in Seattle. You probably know who I'm talking about too. I
Probably.
assume.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so the kind of next bit of it is when Tattrx was happening and I was like really excited, a lot of the people who were coming out of it were in Berlin. And then you moved to Berlin. Like what? And you said you had clients there already, and that's part of the reason why you were able to make that move. And I know you have some ancestral roots there. What was your expectation? Like, what did you think it would be like that is totally not how it is? And like, what's some surprising things about living there, moving there, having moved across the world?
Sure. Yeah, I think I was drawn to Berlin for a number of reasons. Like Berlin being a city like that since the fall of the wall, like a lot of anarchists and artists, and like there's just been this very creative, like without a whole lot of restriction culture, a lot of queer culture, a lot of like music and techno and stuff that has birthed like revolution in Berlin. And so this city specifically attracts a lot of people who are thinking differently. And so even though I might have over the years shared a lot of Berlin artists, they were people from Argentina and Russia and Spain. And you know what I mean? It's like people from all over found themselves attracted to that same culture. And so was I. And it was very cool because I felt very weird. Like even in New York, people would look at me strangely. I told people I was moving from the film industry into hospitality, and they were like, why? Like, I don't understand your resume. Or I remember this guy who wound up making a tattoo app years later. In 2012, he looked at my Tattrx blog and he was like, you really like tattoos that much? And then in like 2018, he was like, hey, so I'm doing this tattoo app. Do you want to be on my board? And I was like, no, I'm good. And the tattoo app doesn't exist anymore. So, but it was just like this boom of like people trying to capitalize on the industry without super like understanding the culture and the people. So even within New York being incredibly like arts focused and like a mix of a variety of cultures, I felt a little off, And so when I came to Berlin, I was like, these people are like the right kind of weird for me. Like I feel at home here. I don't feel othered. I don't feel weird. And so, yeah, after a couple of visits, I felt good about that, and then had work here, like I said. And so logistically, it seemed like doable. But also, yeah, my grandmother was from the south of Germany and spoke German growing up and stuff. And so, like, and cooked German food. And so there was also this tie of like, being in Brooklyn, like being this white girl in the south of Brooklyn, like I'm gentrifying everywhere I walk, and I wanted to like reduce the harm that I was doing. And I was like, so I don't know where to go. Like, I don't know where to go that feels just. I don't know where to go that feels like I'm not hurting somebody when I do it. And when I came to Germany, I was like, so what if I literally go back to where I came from? Like, what if I literally remove my whole presence and go back to like where my family is from? And it's wild because people walk around and they look at me and they clock that I'm German and start speaking to me in German, or they tell me I look Deutsch and I should be speaking Deutsch and stuff. And like, so it feels validating, like, okay, cool. Like I'm here doing some ancestral searching in addition to resonating with the contemporary Berlin culture, which is very, mixed and alive and weird and wild. But in terms of the question of like, what did I not expect? I think I didn't expect to, frankly, be gentrifying here, like, and I think, I walked around being like, oh shit, I'm displacing some of the punks who this was a squat, and then a landlord made them like get evicted, and now they're like renting it out, and and I'm one of the renters. So we can't totally eliminate ourselves from participating in systemic issues. But what I can do is try and talk to like my friends here. The cool thing about a lot of like German laws is that there's a lot of like pro-consumer and pro-tenant and like pro-working class laws. And so there is like a little bit of a buffer where people can work very little or make very little and still survive within a degree. So I'm still like surrounded by people who are in those positions of like being unemployed or underemployed. And so I talk to them. I'm like, okay, so how can I make it right? Like here, how do I participate in this in a, not just an idealized fantasy way of what I imagined Berlin would be, but like in a practical way of I'm here. How do I participate, and where do I give money, and, what do I voice support for? And so I think anywhere you go that you imagine will be a dream place for you to be or a dream job for you to have, once you're there, you realize the complexity and the nuance and the realities of it. And you have to adjust for, this is not a fantasy, this is a day-to-day. So how do I participate in it? And so I really, I think I'm still getting to know Berlin and still getting to know Germany and still learning German. It is a hard language to internalize. But I do love it. Like, it feels right. And I think that's kind of always what I'm trying to do, is like, where feels like the best or the least worst direction for me to go. What
the
makes
least
me
worst
excited
is the key word. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, for work too, like what makes me excited? What could I go on for hours about versus what am I like, saying perfunctory, I could do this, like all of our reactions to things are information that could be actionable of what we do next.
And there's always, even right, as you said, in the dreamiest of jobs, there's parts of it that are not going to be that, because it's the everyday. And like wherever you go, there you are. You're just going to bring in your moods and everything else that's like hard about day to day.
Yeah.
Have you found it easy to make connections in Berlin, like with other either dates or friends or like any kind of connections?
Yeah. I think Germany is one thing and Berlin is another. So I've gone to different parts of Germany, and there tends to be a bit more of like a conservative bent to it, or like a Christian rooted bent to it. Whereas Berlin is so, it's so full of people who are like anti the system, whatever system you want, they're against it. And so it's been cool because with being a polyamorous person, there's a lot of people who are against like mononormativity, the norms of monogamy. And it's not being against monogamy, but just like against the expectation that I should date, move in, get married, have kids, this sort of all of the assumptions that get put on the dating process of getting to know somebody, the stress that comes into relating to somebody gets kind of removed, and you can just kind of see what you're doing and what you'd like to do with this person. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. So I've, like I said, been non-monogamous since 2012 explicitly. I think my whole life I've loved this way. But in Berlin specifically, it was easier to find like-minded people. So, but I think in any city, people can be a bit guarded till they know you well. So I'm usually spending time with people a few times before we find some regularity. Whereas when I was in America in the South, like there was less of a barrier. People would say, "Hey, neighbor," and like welcome you in, but then have a lot of conditional love based off of, well, you need to share my worldview and my values, otherwise I'll cast you out. And so it's a bit of a trade-off where like I default share a lot of worldview and values with people here as I did in New York, but then it'll take a longer time for people to be willing to like have regularity with you or invite you to dinner, that sort of thing. But yeah, it's going so far.
Do you feel like it's very transient and that's why people are guarded, because they feel like you're just going to be gone next week?
I don't know. Maybe I could ask that question. I think a lot of big cities are a bit transient, but I think a lot of people just are selective. Like they really know what they like. And so they don't want to, spend energy on something that they might dislike, And so at least that's been the experience that I've had. It's just like, well, I know I love this community or I love that party. Like I'm really going to go and do these things. And so it just takes a longer time for people to trust that you're going to be one of the people or experiences that they want to have on the regular. But I get that, somebody described like, I was talking to somebody from the American South who also lives in Berlin. And she was like, yeah, down in Georgia where both of us are from, she was like, people would just hug you, but it would be like a loose hug. It's like here people hug you very tight and then let you go. And I was like, that feels accurate. It's just like they're not hanging on to that hug for as long as I want. And you just kind of have to earn that. But I think every city and every country has their own moods around social connection and what a friendship or what a relationship is, which is always interesting to discover.
That thing about hugging, that's fascinating, right? Like a different hug style is like a way a culture can show itself.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that, like you're saying, there's a anti-norm sort of a thread through like being in Berlin, making connections, dating? Is that just for like systems and ideas and politics or like political systems, or is it also about like beauty standards, like gender representation, like those things too?
Yeah, I think for sure. At heart, I think I'm probably an anarchist in those ways. Like I'm still exploring what my anarchism looks like. I do practice relationship anarchy, but in the purest sense of like rejecting hierarchies or rejecting objectivity in something being good or bad. And so what that means being like, I don't want in my romantic life for there to be a partner that matters more inherently than everybody else. And in beauty standards or in a profession, like there's no agreed upon objective good or bad. In New York, it was one of my chief frustrations with people is like, oh yeah, well, success automatically, it means you're rich. I was like, but no, I mean, girl, you're breaking up with somebody every other week. Like you're really miserable. You never sleep, but you're calling yourself successful because of the money in your bank. Like she's like, yeah, no, that's success. And so this objectivity of what success is, what beauty is, what, love is, that never really, like I never got that. I never understood it. I always wanted more context. I always wanted more explanation. And so yeah, I think maybe that's a long way to say that, yes, there's a bit more of that I've experienced here or in any like friends of mine from the Ukraine, for example, have also explained like a similar kind of attitude and different. So it's not just in Berlin. I think it's in any space that has experienced a big disruption of norms or a big disruption of status quo, then there winds up being this very human response of what's normal, what's status quo, then what does that mean? And like, so I love being in places where people are questioning that. And it doesn't really matter to me where you land on it. Whatever you think is beautiful, that's beautiful then, you know? But just like with tattooing, it's like, well, people were saying watercolor is never going to age well. It's like, well, but what does age well mean, man? Like, doesn't, okay, so yeah, if the solid line needs to look a particular way for 20, 30 years, sure, then by that definition, it doesn't track, but like if age well means that you want it to look like it's spreading and fading and evolving and like that you love it, if aging well means you love it, so I've always kind of been drawn to places where you're questioning what is normal. And I definitely experienced that here. And it's super cool because when I go to clubs here in Berlin, like there's like 60-year-olds and there's like, people who are like overweight or disabled or like, it's just like everybody feels welcome and nobody feels like they're made to be othered or ugly or, as I noticed in New York. In New York, I noticed that there's a lot of, yeah, you got to look like a supermodel if you want to be welcomed. And I had some parties that I was going to literally ask you to send in photos for an application to be welcomed into that party. And I was like, I don't like it here. I don't like it here. And so, yeah, being here, I was just like, oh, yes, I'm seeing every type of person. This feels right. This feels good because there's no like arbiter of a universal truth or universal goodness or favorability that like the absence of that kind of hierarchy. Yeah, that makes me feel good and safe.
Even when I was there last summer, I like that thing where you feel like no one's staring at you. It feels so good. And I couldn't even really explain it because I live in the Bay Area. So it's not like I look that different to people here, but there's still, the energy is so different. The way that people like emit energy towards you in Berlin versus here, anywhere in the States, even in places that are, very queer friendly. Yes, I that feeling of just like people don't give a shit and you're welcome regardless of like how you look, what tattoos you have, what kind of hair you have, what gender, how your body looks. Like it's such a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, I mean, I think wherever you feel home, that's great, and that's valid. And a lot of people feel really at home in more like homogenous spaces. I think we even create more homogenous spaces, like even me seeking out all weirdos who are non-conforming. That's in a way like a bit homogenous, like there aren't a bunch of like gun-loving Christians in our space, So like, whatever makes you feel safe is valid and cool and good information, So I don't even really think that there's like a betterness between this space versus that one. It's just like helpful to notice if I'm in this space and I'm feeling relaxed, or if I'm in that space and I'm feeling super aware of how I'm different than you, where would I rather go? And like continuing to ask those questions is helpful in finding like who our people are and where we want to spend our limited days on this earth,
And there's nothing wrong with wanting it to be homogenous, full of like freaks and weirdos, that people are like you, right? Like the whole idea of like, you should have everybody be like different around you. And I'm like, different in ways, but if they have vastly different politics, like I don't want to be around them. I don't want to talk to them. It's like, why should I why? I don't want to be like, that's not an open-minded place and experience that I'm looking for.
It's something that I really like. Going back to tattooing is something that I really had to accept because I think there was always this part of me that felt like an imposter in this space. I even had tattooers tell me I had no voice that was valid in that space because I don't tattoo. And so I always felt like, I want to be accepted everywhere. And I finally realized like the traditionalists or the old school or conservatives relative, like conservatism is so relative, but conservatives within tattooing didn't like me or what I had to say or who I had to share about. And I was like, okay, that's fine then. Like not everybody's going to be your person. And that doesn't devalue you. It just shows you like where you gotta be if you're going to have a good time. It doesn't mean going back to like the absence of an objectivity. I don't think there's objectivity anywhere in anything unless you're talking about literal math and numbers and distance. Like there's no objective beauty. There's no objective like morality. And so, yeah, where do you feel at home, and are you doing no harm to those people? Cool. You know, if I wanted to try to exist in a community full of a lot of like old school neo-traditional tattooers who wanted to maintain the same thing that their grandfathers were doing forever, then I would be like disrupting people who didn't want to be disrupted, and maybe like pushing people in a way they didn't want to be pushed. And so why am I there? But rather accepting they're just not going to like me. Okay. Oh, these people are excited about what I have to say. Let's talk. It's not about building an echo chamber. It's more about just finding like who your people are and realizing like what is valid pushback and then what is just an ideological difference in how you view the world. That's been a helpful disparity to make, or way to distinguish feedback.
And that's also where you grow, right? Like that's where you learn and grow and become more of who you are and help other people become more of who they are, as opposed to like butt heads about ideology that nobody wants to change their mind about. In a tattoo world-wise, like it has taken me, you know, until I found your blog to feel like I belonged somewhere, you know, that people were doing different things and taking risks, because that wasn't happening in the shop where I grew up. Not so much. Like, there were definitely people doing some different things, but I didn't really have access to like them or their clients in that same kind of way. I guess, you know. What were you saying about watercolor? Because, you know, that's something that I started doing that before really anybody else in the Bay Area was doing it, that I could see. And people started coming to me for it. And of course, the kind of feedback that I didn't ask for that was coming towards me was like, this is bullshit. This is not going to last. This is, you know, it's going to fade ugly. It's going to whatever. People were stoked about it. And I was excited to explore it. And in the end of it all, you know, when you think about longevity, like people die all the time. Like if they live 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years and they're super stoked about their tattoo, like who am I to say like, no, I won't do this for you because it won't last 20, 30 years.
Exactly.
And also like things change, you know. I'm getting a blast over on my entire left arm because the things I had there before I didn't like. And it's like, I want tattoos I do to be able to be changed later if a person chooses to. Have there be room for that.
Yeah. I think one of the coolest conversations I had early on was with Amanda Wacob, who got accused a lot of time of like creating designs that won't be sustainable. And she was like, first of all, I don't paint with watercolor. That's the thing. She paints with acrylics, and like any simulation of paint on skin just got all lumped in with watercolors. Like there's a wide range. It revealed the lack of nuance of understanding of that medium from the tattooers who were critiquing it, right? But like at the same time, it was just sort of like this idea of who gets to determine value, like we've mentioned before. And so if the client is informed, I think that's really where, in my opinion, there becomes the difference. If somebody on the outside looking at it says that doesn't look good or that won't age well, that's one thing. If the client says I'm unhappy with this, or what my expectations weren't managed, I thought it would look a certain way and it aged differently than that, then I take issue with that. I'm just like, well, you were engaging in this with a client. Like that's the tattooer's responsibility to at least say, okay, if you want this, this is what's going to happen. Then that's a fair ask, I think, because of the transaction and the collaboration required there. But yeah, otherwise it's not your body, and that person's going to die and that skin will decompose. And like that art only has a few decades of last. So like, don't lose sleep over it, man. Like don't sweat so much. It's not impacting your business, because the kind of people who want that are not coming to you anyway, man. So like it just became this, this real divide that revealed itself. I think watercolor in particular, or the simulation of paint on skin in particular, but all contemporary techniques or all experimenting, was a point for dividing the conservatives with the progressives in tattooing, for sure.
That's such a good way to put it. Yeah, you're right. It was everything. I was like, a couple years into my journey, I was like, I'm doing pointillism. I'm doing, color blending. I'm doing like any of it, it was all taken in this way of like, you're trying to change this industry and it's not going to work. And like, you're just fucking it up, right? Like being in the Bay with just like all the old school people. That's what it felt like.
And traditional Americana is doing well, right? Traditional Japanese is doing well. Like there are indigenous revival tattoo practices happening that are bringing back like pre-colonial techniques. Like everybody is going to resonate differently with something else, and it does not take away from your business, and it does not inherently hurt the trade. If you add variety to it, you don't have to participate in it. You don't have to like it, you know? But it doesn't, I think to say something is harming the trade is like pretty presumptuous that you know the universal single right way to execute this medium. And I just don't think anyone can claim that.
It is absolutely not an objective thing to say.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to Chillpolyam.
Sure.
So what I was curious about is it felt to me like watching like your kind of public identity, you kind of came out in a different, like you started talking about queerness more at a certain point, not super long ago, like some years ago, a couple of years ago. Were you queer as a younger person? Like, did you identify as queer when you were like 20, etc.? Did you date in a queer way?
Yeah, for sure. My first relationship and my first sensual experience was a queer one. But because I was in the American South when I was 14, this girl that I was like liking and holding hands with, it got condemned by the school. And then her mom moved them and flew her to another state because of it. And so I think this happens to a lot of queer people, is just like, it is so, in certain environments, in a lot of environments, it is so condemned and told you're bad and wrong and sick that it gets suppressed. And because I'm bisexual and I also liked men, I was like, okay, well, I guess I got to do this part of me only then. And so for the longest time, I was only being like a cis woman dating a man, or, you know, and any, you know, desire beyond that was driven underground because of these norms I thought I needed to abide by in order to have safety and in order to have social acceptance. And so again, with social media, like evolving the way that it did, a lot more people started feeling comfortable to be out and to be telling their stories. And I was very private about myself. Like you said with Tattrx, it was like, who is this person? It's because I was really private. I didn't want anybody to know anything about me because I didn't want any opinions on my personal life. I only wanted to tell you about other people who were doing cool things. And in 2018, friends of mine who knew that I was non-monogamous and queer, they had a panel, like an in real life panel in New York that they wanted me to participate on. And I joined it. And I spoke at this event and I saw what visibility does. I saw what talking about being not straight and not monogamous does to people who really want to hear that. And I was like, shit, I think I need to talk about this now, you know, but it was a process because starting my Chillpolyamory account, which was an attempt to have visibility from that event moving forward, it was also hard because it was like, okay, I'm coming out, like I've come out privately to different people about different things, but you can't compartmentalize it anymore when it's about your personal life and it's online and everybody you've ever known or interacted with is going to find it. And so, yeah, I think there was just this gradual, like relaxing. I was very militant about not looking too sexual. I didn't want people to think that I was like a very overtly sexual person because I had a lot of shame around that, which was also came from norms. And like, so for that same reason, I didn't really share about femmes or trans people that I was dating because I was like, I don't really want opinions on this yet. Like, I don't feel really confident that I can stand my ground on this without wavering, like when I have those like more bigoted or ignorant feedbacks coming my way. But yeah, with time, like of just continuing to say, this is me. I'm not sorry for it. That was aided by a bunch of people saying, yeah, also me. I'm also like you, you know, and that building of connection and that building of solidarity made me feel like a bit more emboldened to not care what people, again, who don't share your worldview, I didn't care as much what they thought about me because I was exposed to so many more people who were my people. But that did take a bit of a leap of faith and a little bit of time that I imagine I'm still in that process in some way. Like I'll continue to get more open and vulnerable as the years go on. It's been kind of cool to, as a self-discovery thing, not just as a service or a job.
I mean, I'm not even sure how much more open you could be because you're very open and also boundaried in a way that feels really healthy. I don't even really understand how you're able to be that public and keep your sanity and be this chill of a person. Like, how are you doing that?
Well, so nice. Thank you. I mean, I think if you are sharing online about who you are, which I imagine for artists, it's a similar thing. Like your work is who you are. So it's a very personal expression of yourself. When I say like, this is who I love and this is how I talk to people I care about, everybody online who can see that is going to have an opinion. And that includes everybody online. And so I've like encountered, big pylons from white supremacists and from, I've been stalked and I've had like just a lot of hate mobs come my way. And I think it's been a bit of trial by fire where it started as this very earnest, small, I only had like 500 people looking at me and they were all like-minded. So it felt insulated and safe to as I was growing, the more people who hated me for existing, saw me, and it was just like, okay, well, this is happening, right? It's not like I wanted to gradually get better at dealing with it. It's like, this is happening. I have to figure out a way to be sane in this. And it's been cool to build community with like other creators, especially in this space, people who talk about their personal life online. Figure out where's the line there. Like, what do you keep private? What is just yours? How do you protect yourself? How do you protect the people in your life? And how do you have boundaries around how much time you spend on the apps and that kind of thing? And so currently, in addition to all of the therapy that I do, that's the other thing I shared on the apps, my history of like, I was in a cult for a lot of years when I was a kid and this and that. And so I have a lot of specific trauma around public humiliation. And so the apps were just recreating that over and over. Just like public pylons reminded me of the in-person public pylons. And I was like, I have made a big mistake of this is my job now. And it is exactly the thing that hits my biggest button from forever ago. But on the one hand, like with trial by fire, you experience things and then you don't die. So you're stronger a little bit from it. I'm like, okay, well, that didn't actually, my worst fears didn't come true. I'm still around. People still love me, this and that. So you start to feel a little bit more safe. Like they don't actually have the power that your brain tells you they will, all these pylons. But as well, I've created boundaries of like structural barriers between me and the mobs of, having friends of mine screen my videos before I post them publicly. Like, hey, do you have any feedback from this? Or do you anticipate any angles of where people could, hit me on this or that? And it's not to prevent people from disagreeing with me, but rather just to have like this feeling that I'm not alone in content creation, that like someone else has laid eyes on it. And so I'm going into this with them, that if somebody's got a legitimate complaint about something, like both of us signed off on this or all three of us signed off on this. And so we're all figuring out solutions together. Like that feeling of togetherness feels good, as well as now the partner that I live with looks at all my comments. I do not look at any of my comments anymore. And he'll just read and read and read and tell me, okay, this one has value. Here's that one. It's so much easier. You don't have to go up and down with the weight of the world, because I went in like 6 months from 10,000 to 100,000 followers. And it's just, there's too many people, there's too many opinions, and you have to figure out a way to pace yourself and not get too wrapped up in it, for sure.
It's something that, when I kind of feel like I want to chase numbers, well, mostly because of the podcast now. Like I want more ears, on the podcast. And when I get a taste of it, I'm just like, nope, hot water. Nope, don't want it. I don't think I want it. I don't think it's for me. And it's interesting because like my whole career, I've been like, well, why are people who are not as interesting, who are not doing work as interesting or as good as me, have 2, 3, 4 times more followers? And like whatever the mechanics are of getting followers, then when I like get a taste of fame, I'm like, no, 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 thank you.
Yeah, it's a thing. I mean, in tattooing, it's definitely a thing. Commercial work is gonna be a different experience than very niche or very expressive work, you know? And I really think the quality of a follower and a client is way different than the quantity. I've worked with tattooers who have millions of followers and they still have similar struggles of trying to find the right match in their mentions or in their requests of, you know, they deal with different things of like people being very demanding and very expecting versus like less relaxed, like you are in this niche and so therefore I trust you, do whatever you want. It's like, oh no, you are a technician, execute this exactly as I request. And so there's the illusion that a lot of numbers equals financial or creative and interpersonal success. Those do not match up one-to-one at all. And I think like, I don't know if Philip Liu or somebody, there was like somebody who was an iconic tattoo person, like period agreed upon by everybody, who had like maybe like 10,000 followers or something. I don't know if it was him, it was somebody. And I remember being like, this right here, this is an example of why numbers don't fucking matter on these apps, because it has nothing to do with any sort of objectivity. And a lot of people will flock to something because it's trendy or because it speaks to the moment or because it's commercially successful currently. But yeah, if you're getting people that are really cool, that are coming in, who get you, who are paying you your rate, then that is definitely, I think, more important. It's a balancing act, but I think that's more important. But yeah, for me, for having increased numbers, it was really overwhelming. Like, because I'll have videos that are stories about my personal life go viral, where millions of people are watching them and like armchair diagnosing me as like, you're abusive, or actually you're an abuse victim. And I'm just like, there's too many people.
Mm-hmm.
There's too many people in the world.
With too many opinions. Like,
Because
why do you have to say anything? Just stop it.
yeah, people get big mad. And so I think there's, value in narrowing your scope, at least of what you engage with. Even if you get big online, limit what you engage with so that you can have a good day, because our human brains weren't meant to experience that much feedback in that short amount of time. It's just going to be overwhelming and not productive. At least that's been my experience.
Do you now have to turn down, like, I know that one of your parts of like the work that you do with Chillpolyam is one-on-one, like kind of peer support. Do you now have to turn people down for that because it's just too many people wanting it? Now that you're like so well known, that you're an expert.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because like a person who writes a polyamory, like not self-help book, but like, a book that's an authoritative point of reference in polyamory, just asked me to weigh in as a quote unquote expert. And I was like, I'm uncomfortable with that title. But that goes back to me just like not wanting objectivity in interpersonal interactions to be a thing. Side note. But anyway, in terms of your question of like, do I turn away work now? Not really. I do if I think it's not going to be beneficial to one or both of us. I imagine it's similar to what tattooers experience of just like, I have the hours, I have the skills, but like this is not a good fit. I'll do that. Where people, want me to coach them on a life philosophy that I'm just like, I'm not good at that, or I don't believe in that. So go to somebody else. But I tend to book out like a month in advance. I have a bunch of calls each week, and I have a couple hundred pen pals, which is really cool. I created a pen pals option at a more accessible rate where people can write me once a week, and then I can help like chat with a couple hundred people rather than need them to have like booking an entire hour just to themselves, where I'm more limited. And so it's been cool to have a variety of ways to be accessible. But I also refer a bunch of my friends, because just like tattooers only having two hands, it's like each individual only has so much energy and time in the day. So there's a bunch of us doing this thing. let me tell you about the other people if I'm not available. And I think that abundance and that inter-community referrals lifts us all up. So yeah, I do a mix of all that.
How do you deal with the expectations, right? Like we were talking earlier about how some tattoo artists will just be like, I'm deleting every email I've ever gotten as I don't care in this moment. I assume you have days like that too, where you're like, I don't want to write back to all of you bitches with all your little problems. Like, go Google it. Like, how do you deal with those days and those weeks?
It's funny. I think it just goes back to like personality style. So like I'm very entertained by tattooers who are just very overwhelmed by admin because I'm not overwhelmed by that.
Okay.
I'm not overwhelmed by people writing stuff. But like I'm a good fit for working with them because they make me chuckle where I'm just like, yeah, don't worry. You go offline for a month. I got you, And so in that way, I think I learned that that's just not a thing that really drains me because I have a pretty decent boundary of like, somebody is coming to you. Like tattooers get this, like, I'm writing you a novella about this butterfly I want to get, And it's just like, where is the actionable information in your narrative? Like where, okay, you want it to be blue on the arm, And so I'm entertained by tattooers being like frustrated by that. I'm like, don't you worry. I will write in your event on your calendar, blue butterfly on the arm. And then I will write back to this person. Thanks so much for trusting us with that story. It sounds important, this and that, and like, so I don't know. I've always enjoyed that of just like whoever's in front of you, what do they need? And then I'll meet that. But I think it really depends on fortifying yourself. And I think tattooers as well, because you have to give so much emotional energy and physical energy. You've got to fortify yourself with like, am I well fed? Am I well rested? Am I, mentally sound and in a community, in a supported space where if you're tapped out, if you have nothing to give, then yeah, those kinds of requests will be too much and not okay. And then we'll risk being like assholes to those people who, just want help themselves from someone they thought would help you, So for my own personal work, like a lot of what I do first is make sure that I'm good. Because if I'm not good, I'm going to like cancel or email everybody and say, I'll get back to you tomorrow. Because I would rather delay a thing than, come to you when you're vulnerable and like be a dick to you. So luckily, yeah, that hasn't been as huge of a hurdle for me for whatever reason. I think it's just we're all born with different personality traits.
And like how lucky for us, right? To have different pluses and minuses and such. Yeah, I would just like wait till I feel like getting back to people could be like a month or two, but I'm just like, just be patient, just wait. I'll get back to you eventually.
Yeah, and the right person will totally be down by that and not be angry at you for it. And then you tattoo them and they're mad at you. It's like matchmaking, you be however you are. And then the right match for that will be who finds you.
I love that you refer to it as matchmaking. That's something that I always thought that if I had to pick a different career, I'd probably be a matchmaker, but I would meant literally dating. Like I would have like a queer, polyamory friendly like dating agency. But I love that you're referring with that term to like matching chefs and restaurants, like matching clients and artists, matching like clients for yourself with like the kind of work that you do with peer support. It's such a, it is like a very encompassing word.
I love that. If you ever make a matchmaking agency like that, I'll definitely hop on board and see who I meet through you.
I would rather like partner with you as like business partners. I mean, you could be, I guess, using it for your dating needs too, but that's totally like a dream. It's actually something I used to do in my old shop. Like I had a piece of like a drawing on the wall of like I think it was a tree. And then I would have my clients who were single and looking just write like a little blurb by themselves and what they were looking for and like put in the tree, like fold it up, put it in the tree. And then they would just write like, I don't know, like femme person or something in the front,
Aww.
So then somebody else who was coming in who was like into femmes could like go and look at their little ad and then I would exchange their numbers for them.
Ooh, little tattooed classifieds. I love that.
Yeah, but because it's always been like, I've worked on my own, just me on my own for so long now, like it just wasn't enough people to really make this a real thing. Like I did set up a couple of folks and like it did work. One couple is married. Yeah, it's really cute. but yeah, it's just like a little dream job somewhere, in some other pocket that I'm like, if I had the time and the energy to develop this, but the podcast came next. So
Yeah, I mean, I imagine you matchmake. I imagine all of us matchmake all the time. We refer, oh, I think you'd like this person, or go to that party, you'll have a good time. Like, we'll never know the ripple effects that we have of sending people to spaces where they meet the love of their life or the loves of their life. I think that's really beautiful. Yeah.
I think that I love that you see the world this way. I think that most people don't think about other people very much. And it's sad. And that's why like the people who do, I'm just like stoked to connect with, because I think that most people just think about themselves and their own experience. And so many more people than I would think about how someone else's happiness would detract from their happiness. Right? The scarcity mindset is so real.
It's true. It's true. I think I would be curious how many people like had their own needs met would maybe change on that. Like, I think a lot of people get tapped out because they're not meeting their own needs. They're in a job they hate. Their family is asking too much of them, this, and that. And so they feel like they have nothing to give, or they're only thinking about how this potential new element is a threat, and it comes from, I imagine, some kind of real sense of scarcity of like at least energy, even if it's imagined scarcity, like there's not enough love to go around, there's not enough tattoo clients to go around. There are, but if you're exhausted, there will feel like a finite amount of energy you have to give to something, which means like, yeah, your window of tolerance is lower. You're gonna, blow up faster than you might if it was a good day, that kind of thing. So that's been something that's been cool is anyone who comes to chat with me, it's the premise is they want to talk about how their life can maybe be their best version of itself, right? So there's already a curiosity. There's already a self-inquiry happening. So I think my worldview is a bit slanted by mostly talking to people who want to be the best versions of themselves. But they do talk about people in their lives who are very self-absorbed and self-centered. And usually there's like kind of a logical, reason behind it, not to justify it, but it's just like, yeah, it sounds like they've had a lot of trauma and no access to therapy. So that tracks this and that. So we just, try and all we have control over is what we do, what our actions and our words are. And so if that includes like what we work on for ourselves, like if we feel like, oh, these new people or this new job or anything else is threatening me, it's like, okay, so what can I do to feel a bit softer or to feel less threatened? Like if this isn't actually going to take anything materially from me. I don't know. I try to be more solution oriented, but I wasn't always this way. I've been through like a lot of shitty situations and I'm really happy for the absence of those. So like a regular day that's not shitty, I'm like, this is a great day. And so, yeah, I just like want to help other people find like the absence of their hardship, I guess. And I think a lot more people would be curious about other people's experiences if they had the absence of their hardship. I don't know.
Brilliant. I love it.
Maybe it's optimistic. I don't know.
Well, there's, that's the brilliance. Like optimism is good, right? Like absence of hardship, perfect. Like looking at, instead of looking at what's missing, looking at what is here, and what is here is space and like a lack of hardship. It's beautiful. How come you don't have a podcast? Like you are so... You say such amazing things all the time, every day on the apps. Like, how come you don't put it in podcast format?
Thank you again. Yeah, no, I think I'm not intimidated. That feels like it has different connotations. I'm like daunted by the commitment that I would bring to a podcast. Like if I'm gonna put something out weekly, it's gonna be top tier quality, and I'm like already doing a lot. So I want to hold off. I'm not saying no, never, but same with writing a book. A few different publishing companies have come to me and I'm just like, yeah, but I could also not do that. And that would also be nice for me.
Oh my God, a book though. That's amazing that you've been approached. Like most people, right? They look for somebody to publish their shit and like you have. You have them coming to eat out of your hand.
Yeah, it's nice, right? Like every situation has its own pros and cons, and so I'm very grateful for that. But I think with that with that luxury of an abundance of options now that I've been doing chill polyamory work for 5 years now. So now there's like an abundance of options. I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I would have said, yeah, let's do it. I don't really know where this is going to go, but now there feels like that sense of stability. And so I only want to do what I want to do. And that currently is the free work that I'm going to put out is going to be short form videos, which, like I said, I have a degree in making short form nonfiction stuff. So like short form storytelling is less of a lift for me. But as well, I have a Patreon where I do all of my like long form audio and video that feels a bit like it buffers me from some of the stressors we talked about. Because if I were going to do a podcast, I'd include so many personal anecdotes, and that I just don't want it to be available to everybody. Like, I just don't want everybody to have that information. So maybe when I conceptualize a podcast that includes like a few more barriers, then maybe yes. But currently my Patreon functionally pays my bills. So I put all of my excess energy towards, that sort of directly reciprocal kind of relationship.
I mean, it could also be part of your Patreon, right? It doesn't have to be an open source sort of thing. It could be part of Patreon and like a higher tier pay.
It's true. It's true. I do enjoy making long form videos. So I'm doing that now. And I think, I'm just a video person, not as much of an audio engineer. Maybe it comes down to that at the end of the day. But a lot of one thing I was just going to say, like a lot of people that I've talked to with this idea of success looking a particular way, or people telling you should do this thing, then there's this impulse, you should do it. Checking in, making sure you want to do it. Because if you don't super want to do it, if it's not exciting, even if it looks like quote unquote success, if you're not excited about it, will you really show up for it in the way that you would want to show up for it? I don't know. The trajectory of what you should do versus what you could do, go towards, what you would have fun doing if you had the luxury of such an option. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
For sure, yes. And I don't mean to say that you should, but that it would be nice if you did. When I was subscribing to a Patreon, your longer form videos, I would put them on and listen to them like a podcast, like while I was cooking or like, folding laundry, because that's like my favorite thing is like getting the voices of my favorite people out there, like who have things to say that I find valuable, just in the background, but not like I'm listening, but just have it be like part of my whatever daily thing I'm doing, or like walking the dog, or I just like that format a lot, I guess, because it doesn't require my eyeballs.
Heard. Yeah. And I think that's really great that you're doing a podcast, and who knows, maybe you've planted a seed that in like 6 months or 2 years, I'll be like, I've had the idea to make a podcast,
Yeah.
So it takes time sometimes.
And also like, because with a podcast, one of the things that, like say I've thought about, not very much because there's always plenty to say, but what if I run out of ideas, right? And like, I'm sure that's the case for any type of theme topic that one will base like an account on, or like a informational channel on. So, but you always have things to say. There's always stories. There's always things you're learning and growing because about human relationships. And there's always people you're meeting that you could interview. So I was like, this is a very deep well,
Yeah, and you have a really open format of like a variety of topics. So if you don't run out of people, then you won't run out of things to say.
For sure. Yeah. No, I feel like there's a lot to say for sure here. And if I run out, then I'll stop.
It can be really conversational. That's the cool thing, is like in making media where you feel like you're kind of speaking into the void, or you're like talking to your camera, your computer, or your microphone. It feels a bit more insulated. But like once I started doing workshops and people would send me photos of 12 people gathering around the TV to watch me doing a workshop, I was like, oh, this is real. Like this is not just me talking into a computer, it was intense, but I think it's really cool because, you really can have this ripple effect. So yeah, if you're excited about showing up to something and curious and maintain that curiosity, then it won't be boring. Because as long as you're curious, other people are going to be wishing they could ask the same questions of that person, but you get the chance to. So, even if it's just a dozen people, it could like materially impact that dozen people. And then that has value, so.
And if it's literally about helping other people grow and learn, as one of my mentors says, saying it once is not saying it at all, right? You can say more nuances of a thing several times before somebody really clicks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How many times did somebody tell you something, but then 10 years later, you're like, oh, like it's the first time you heard it, because we aren't always ready for that message. And so, yeah, if you can just be part of a variety of people saying the same thing, then you're contributing to that person's change, and then they'll change on their own timeline.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to make a note about the word expert, even now as we're wrapping up towards the end of the podcast, because I know it makes you cringe. I saw what you said earlier about it and about the book. I know the book, I've read the book. But yeah, most, polyamory, I've been in the polyamorous scene since I was 20, I don't know. Yeah, 20 years or so. And most of the books out there are very flawed. Either they're written by shitty people or they're written with a really limited perspective. And even though your work is not a book, but it is, you can look at it as a body of work, right? You can look back through the videos and different topics and get information that you need if you have a specific concern or question about polyamory. So you are an expert, right? It is as if you've written a book, and the book that you have written, your body of work, to me as a queer person, as an immigrant, feels much more comprehensive than a lot of the other stuff out there. Basically anything that else that's out there. So this word expert, it is the kind of a cringy word because it's relying on sort of these capitalistic white supremacist structures of ladders and powers and who gets to say how things go. But if we separate it from that, right, just as language, what does it mean in English language? Somebody who knows shit that people want to learn, you are an expert.
I love that. I think, I'm an amateur linguistics nerd. So kind of unpacking what a word means is always something I'll take the bait. No, I think, if in tattooing, what I love is the term master, somebody who's been doing this for a decade or 20 or 30 years, super cool to validate that with the word master. And every master that I've met is always learning. Apologies. Did you hear my dog? Should I re-say it? Yeah.
No, go for it. You were good. We're good. Okay. It's organic. Yeah.
Every master that I've ever met is always learning. And so when I encounter the word expert, I think it's sort of a definitive, maybe it's a semantics thing, but I hear that as a definitive. I am done learning things. I am now the authority on it. And that just rubs me the wrong way. Maybe other people are using that in a different way, but I would rather people say I validate, you think about this a lot. You talk about this a lot. You have a lot of lived experience. I value your opinion. That all I will stand with 100%. I agree with you. I do think and talk about this a lot. I have a lot to say. Versus if someone says you are an expert, sometimes the word and the association with authority can make people take your word as law or take it as a universal truth without questioning. And I want to make people question that. I don't ever take the word of an authority figure or institution or anything as the law. Why? Why? I always just ask the question, why? Not in a combative way, but just in a curious, does this resonate with me way? Because I've had, and I imagine it comes from my own experience of being raised with a family that didn't really take care of me. So I had to take care of myself, and then going to a cult with people who I thought were in charge, who definitely didn't have my best interests in play. And the governments usually don't have our best interests in play, and politicians and stuff. And so authority figures often, they have a position of power, but that needs to be challenged. And so as a result, I always want to challenge any positions of power that people want to put me in without undermining, like, yeah, whatever you know or whatever you spend all your days doing, that has value. So something that's a bit more, challenging of like some kind of universal power. That's kind of mainly the reason I cringe at the word expert. Again, it goes back to semantics. So yes, I think it's cool to embrace whatever you know a lot about or think a lot about. And with making podcasts, with making videos, with having like ongoing dialogue online, it's one of the reasons I'm not writing a book, is because I feel like you can't control alt delete that. You know, like I can't make a follow-up immediately to clarify. I like that it's a living, breathing document on social media to be like, oh yeah, word, I heard you, you know, here's an alteration. I want to always be editing and evolving. It's intimidating to me to put something out there that's like a definitive period, you know, point on something that I care about. That, who knows? I'm only 36, so maybe in my 40s or 50s, I'll have the confidence to do that or something, but not yet.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess I was just saying, like, your body of work is a book to me that's like searchable, right? And the difference between, to me, of like what you're saying, authority versus an expert in the field, is authority was put there by somebody else. I did not choose them to be in power over me. And if I'm forced to listen to them in whatever way, like I don't consent. But when you as a person on the internet who wants to learn about something, right, comes to somebody else who's talking about that thing, and you're like, this thing you're saying makes sense to me, like I agree with you, I find you compassionate, I find you kind, I find you like knowledgeable, right? Like then I'm the one who put you in that power position of like being an expert. And so that feels a lot more consensual and organic than like a cop.
I love that. Yeah, as someone who's in DS relationships, I get that. You can have power over me. I've deemed you worthy of it.
Right, absolutely. So I guess that's how I see it.
Sure.
Well, so one of my last questions is like, what is a thing that you are working with on right now? Like, is there just like a concept that you're instilling inside your body, digesting, or maybe there's like a project or a plan or like something? What's like a kernel of something you're working on?
Like for myself?
Yeah, like in your life. Yeah.
Yeah,
Either
I
professional or
think
personal.
for me, I'm working on, more of my real world relationship with things and with nature, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's too airy fairy sounding. So I have a lot of like tangible relationships with people, but a lot of that is built online and in long distance and in video meetings and stuff like this. And that is valid and strong. And starting to plant plants and starting to like, you know, love on and paint my home is like there's a lot of tangible offline things that I'm trying to restore some balance, because the last 20 years have been so dominated by being online. All of my relationships have been built through that medium. And so I love social media for that element. And also we can be chronically online and a little bit too in our heads and lose sight of what's literally right in front of us. And so I think I'm working to, like, maybe I'm working inverse of other people. I don't know how many people struggle with this, but like being someone who mostly their social life was formed online, I'm showing up to cookouts more and picnics more, and I'm working with my tangible real world space more, as well as trying to let go of that which I can't control, which includes everybody online. Because, yeah, if 5,000 people think what you're doing is shit, okay, maybe you'll never see those 5,000 people ever in your life. And so does that matter to you tangibly? So I think that's an extension of focusing on the tangible, focusing on touching grass, is focusing on which opinions you weight with which values. So that's what I'm continuing to explore personally.
You were last summer when we hung out, you mentioned that you have some social anxiety and that's like, it makes it sometimes difficult for you to do in-person stuff. Like, do you think that's partially why you have built a lot of your life online?
Totally.
Yeah. So you're like really
Totally.
challenging this right now.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of like I have an anxiety disorder, I have agoraphobia, I have bipolar, but also I have that trauma of having been in a cult, which was group related, and so
Mm-hmm.
everything was structured around you exist in a physical group, and so I was like, I feel so much safer being in a dispersed online group where I feel community, but then they don't all talk to each other and create machinations against me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think my next step is like relearning how that is not the norm, despite me experiencing it in childhood and adolescence. That is not usually how people experience groups of people, is in a like cult way. So, part of getting there is by building relationships with people in real life who know each other and hypothetically could conspire against me, but don't. I mean, everything we're scared of, it usually comes from a lived experience of like a justifiable thing we're
Mm-hmm.
afraid of. Something happened to make us scared of that thing. But then being grown, it's like, okay, can I work towards having that fear not dominate my present day activities? And that's what I always want to keep focusing on. Yeah.
And so the last question is probably relevant to what you already just said, but what are some or a few small things that are making you happy lately?
I love that question. I think sewing, plants, and getting to know people who know each other in real community, in small local community, and trusting that that won't be harmful to me. Um, that is making me happy. I think that's how we overcome any fear, right? Is like with tiny little trust, and then it goes okay, and then we're fine, and then we can trust again. It's like we build that track record of feeling safe. And it's like, oh, actually, maybe I don't have to be scared of that thing like I was when I was 15 or whatever. So it makes me happy every time that my fear
Mm-hmm.
is proven wrong.
Exposure therapy.
Yeah, maybe I've just like layman's terms exposure therapy. Yeah. And I picked up boxing in the last few weeks, which is making me happy. Yeah.
Cool. That's super cool.
Mm.
Getting energy out that way is really valuable, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah, especially for
weightlifting,
femmes
boxing.
who like struggle. I don't know if this has ever been your experience, but I've struggled to like be in touch with anger. And so every femme I talk to who's like, oh yeah, I've always just like tried to suppress anger, or I actually can't even tell if I'm angry. It's like boxing forces you to push that out and kind of,
Mm.
yeah, it's like a good catharsis. So it's been neat to meet. I go to an all femmes
Oh,
boxing class, and it's
cool.
cool
That's
to
so
connect.
cool.
Yeah, we all get each other. I won't box next to like hyper mask dudes. I can't do that right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been really cool in my class.
Yeah, I feel like I was going to ask you more about that. Like, as such a conscious person and a femme person, like, how do you date men? Like, I know you like men. So, like, how do you date men if you see the problems with them? But I feel like I don't know, like out of that territory. So,
Oh, it's cool. I mean, in a nutshell, I like to date queer men. I like to date men who aren't intimidated by their own like queerness. So even if they are totally, feeling straight, but they could imagine sucking a dick, I'm just like, cool. All right, so we're on the same level. Like you're not scared of that. You're not existentially threatened by that, then cool. Like, so there's a bit of a screening process of like, how much are you buying into the messages and the idea of masculinity that you're told? And how much are you working against that? And I'm cisgender, I date trans people, and I imagine it's similar. I don't know. But just of like, okay, you're a cis person, but how much are you thinking about these things and how much are you
mhm.
questioning and challenging these things? And so, in a similar way, I'm a woman who dates men, but just like, what kind of man?
Mhm.
And what's he doing with his time? That tends to be my questioning in that respect.
Like, you're just very discerning. Yeah.
Yeah, I want people who similarly are trying to unlearn the unhelpful things that they've been told about how to relate to people. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool. Well, Morgan, you are just like the most precious treasure of a human, and I'm so happy to know you in this sort of vast online, amorphous, sort of casual space. I do hope to spend more time with you in person when we have a chance. Um, Thank you for coming on the podcast.
For sure. That's so sweet. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. I love this format of being open ended and talking about everything. A lot of podcasts I go on are very like militant in their directiveness, and this feels a lot more organic. So thank you. It was a pleasure.